I think it's important for us to understand where this entire war came from. It did not come from Bashar al-Assad. It came from Washington. There was a decision in 2011 to overthrow Assad. Actually, that came from Jerusalem. This has been a desire of the Israeli government that stretches back more than 25 years. Netanyahu's idea is make the Middle East in Israel's image, overthrow every government that opposes Israel. He's had a friend in that, and that is the CIA and the United States government. So this war in Syria did not come from Assad's repression. It did not come from Assad's dictatorship. This war came from a presidential order by Obama to overthrow Assad, starting in the spring of 2011. We have a name for this program. It was Operation Timber Sycamore. The United States, together with other countries in this region, trained fighters, especially jihadists, including the ones that just took power, to overthrow the regime. This created chaos. 600,000 dead in Syria in a war that has gone on for 14 years. The outcome of this war is what the CIA wanted back in 2011, which is that a jihad group would take power in Syria after being armed by the United States. The Syrian war is just one of 6 wars that Israel has promoted, including in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan. We had the list, actually, from Wesley Clark back in 2001 when he was handed a paper in the Pentagon that the goal was 7 wars in 5 years. The only war that hasn't taken place yet, to Netanyahu's great consternation, is the US war with Iran, which Israel is still trying to instigate to this very day.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's stream, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Rumble. Hello to everyone in the live chat. We are expecting our also moderators to join soon for us to have the best place to comment, debate, discuss about different topics, especially today's topic, and this is going to be about Epstein's relationship with Ehud Barak and how they have conspired to oust the former President Bashar al-Assad and install a friendly regime to Israel for the benefit of the Israeli dominance over the region, something that I have been arguing for quite a long time, since 2017. And in this stream, I would like to make things very clear. We are going to be very analytical, we are going to be very critical, and we're going to present to you some of the facts and let you decide whether or not this was a popular revolution for democracy or this was yet another plot by the US, the planners in the US, including the secret services and including people who didn't have official status in the US administrations or in the Israeli government, and yet they have played a role in shaping the outcome of this conflict for the benefit of Israel. And I would like to make something very, very clear. I receive comments, some of whom are here in the live chat. I receive comments under the YouTube videos when the streams are over. I receive comments on X by people in the West and also by Syrians telling me that I am driving against the tide, which is the tide is going in the direction of normalizing Jolani, his regime, via the US, via Russia, via China today, which I'm also going to discuss during this show, so stay tuned for that, by Turkey, by Israel, by everyone in the region. And I would like to say, even if 24 million Syrians come and vote for Jolani, I still would have and will have a different opinion about him. And this is, I believe, the essence of democracy. The essence of democracy is that I have the right to disagree with the judgment and the opinion of the people. Even if the vast majority of the people believe in something, I still have the right to believe in a different theory or in a different reality or in a different fact based on my analysis and based on my understanding of the Syrian war. And at the end of the day, this is something that I have to say with my sad and bleeding heart, that the vast majority of Syrians do not even know what is Operation Timber Sycamore. Like, they don't know the role of the CIA, they don't know the role of the MI6, they don't know the role of Israel and other regional countries, partly because the former Syrian regime was the worst in PR and the worst in delivering the messages and the facts to the people. They were like a dinosaur, a dying dinosaur who couldn't deliver simple messages based on facts and showing the people the reality of the matter. They were mostly into sensationalist approaches and talking about conspiracies. Yes, conspiracies exist, but you have to prove them, and those were very easy to prove. Therefore, the alternative to, or the antidote of the Syrian regimes, the former Syrian regimes, PR and media outlets were very smart, and they were very capable of persuading and propagandizing millions and millions of people. And I'm going to show you some of them today in this live streaming, because many people are doing a very, I would say, a job of a propagandist for Jolani. And unfortunately, nobody is calling them out, because nowadays, as I said, the tide is moving in one direction. And if you stand in the face of this tide, they try to eliminate you. They try to eliminate you morally. They try to eliminate you psychologically. They even try to eliminate you physically. So you have to be very careful if you want to express an opposite opinion, because the mob culture will come, the people who belong to the mob culture, they will come and try to destroy you, whether online or on the ground during our lifetime. So tonight, I'm going to take you guys into a story that very few people in the world have ever heard in full. This is a story stitched together from leaked emails, private communications, buried documents, and a geopolitical pattern that stretches across Washington, Tel Aviv, Moscow, and Damascus. This is a story in which wars are traded like investments. Massacres are basically background noise. And Syria becomes not a country, not a society, not a homeland in their eyes, but rather simply a transaction. And at the center of it all is the most unlikely connector imaginable. A man the Western mainstream media for a long time insisted he was nothing more than a financier. A man the cabals used in the US and Israel as a human back channel, a walking intelligence hub, a passport into the shadows. This man is, of course, Jeffrey Epstein. And besides him, there was Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, former military chief, former defense minister, and of course, a man whose hands have been inside more geopolitical operations than most people will ever know. So their correspondence, those emails we're going to discuss today, actually reveal something, in my opinion, most of the journalists and the diplomats and the analysts have not told you in these details, right? Basically, Epstein was involved also in the Syria file. Ehud Barak explicitly linked Syrian regime change to geopolitical cash flow. Remember that. they linked this misery and war into a geopolitical cash flow. And finally, Israel built a Russia-Israel back channel through Epstein to shape the outcome of the Syrian war. And tonight, I will explain how that operation worked, who benefited, and why it matters right now as the US prepares to not only embrace the Syria's new de facto ruler, Jolani, but also to push for a centralized government in the country, all in the hands of Jolani. And remember, this is the same man whose forces committed some of the darkest massacres in modern Syrian history. So this stream or this explanation might be long, but in my opinion, this is intentionally long because the truth cannot be told in slogans, right? So my friends, sit back and grab your coffee. So let's begin. And this starts with the email that should have changed everything. And this story begins with an email, basically. I will show you the source of today's stream, and this is going to be the drop site, which they have done here amazing job in analyzing the emails, the leaked emails of Jeffrey Epstein, and this article is called Jeffrey Epstein and the Mossad, How the Sex Trafficker Helped Israel Build a Back Channel to Russia Amid Syrian Civil War. Let me just check my sources because and this is, by the way, guys, this is an email. It's not like a top secret memo, right? It's not a leaked NSA cable. It's just a casual message written. I'm going to show you now the messages written like a chat between two buddies, and those are Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak, as if they're planning a business trip, right? So, and this is the first email, basically. Epstein writes to Ehud Barak, with civil unrest exploding in Ukraine, Syria, Somalia, Libya, and the desperation of those in power, isn't this perfect for you? This is how he says. So perfect, right? For them, war they see war as an opportunity and chaos as investment, and for them, people dying. But Epstein thinking about profit potential, right? And Barak here replies to him, and it says, you are right in a way, but not simple to transform it into a cash flow. Cash flow, huh? Let me ask you, my friends, when was the last time you heard a former prime minister, and not just any prime minister, right? This is the former Israeli leader, describe the Syrian war as a cash flow problem? In my opinion, when you read these emails, it seems that the Epstein and Barak weren't just spectators of Syria's destruction. They were treating it like an emerging market, right, for future investments. In my opinion, this one email basically killed the lie that Syria's war was a popular uprising that took the world by surprise, because behind the cameras, as you see, behind all these ridiculous liberal NGOs, behind the think tanks, behind the neocon think tanks, basically, and behind all these so-called democratic slogans, men like Epstein and Barak were threading their fingers through the entire region. And here comes the back channel to Moscow, basically. And this is one of the biggest revelations that Israel used Epstein and Barak to open a secret line to Moscow. Maybe you are surprised, but this is true. Epstein, the man with the plane, the private island for sex trafficking, minors, the political Rolodex, served as a liaison between Israeli intelligence and the Russian politicians. Because Israel believed, and rightly so, that Russia held or hold back then the key to Syria's future, and that the US would eventually concede the Syrian file to Moscow. And here comes the second email, which is very important in my opinion. The second email is Barak. He is writing basically and saying it clearly, the Kremlin holds the keys. And we have to see here the email. On May 19th, Barak sent Epstein, this is, I believe, in 2018, Barak sent Epstein a draft titled "The Kremlin Holds the Keys," which argued that Assad's regime had permanently lost its legitimacy and Russia should take leadership to negotiate a swift end to the war. Or C, years of bloody massacres in no man's land, Syria. A post-Assad Syria, wrote Barak, was a foregone conclusion. It was now up to Russia to decide whether or not to convince Assad to leave or prolong the war. So here Barak's editorial proposed that the US and its allies should accept a price for a Russia-led solution to the war. He acknowledged that removing Assad from power should not compromise Russia's interests and perspectives in Syria, namely Russia's deep ties within the Syrian security apparatus and its access to naval bases at Tartus and Latakia. He framed the chemical weapons threat as a decisive issue requiring initiative by the Russians, who knew the generals of the chemical weapons units on a first-name basis. So this was Israel's view, right? If Assad falls, Russia must lead the transition, not necessarily the US or Europe, because Russia can deliver stability, legitimacy, and guarantees. This is in their eyes. And what kind of transition are we talking about here, right? Of course, it's a familiar one, a post-Assad Syria that is broken, decentralized, manageable, and preferably too weak to challenge Israel. Epstein, with his deep ties across American intelligence, finance, academia, and politics, was the ideal career. He wasn't bound by official channels. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't accountable to anyone. He wasn't supervised by anyone, right? Epstein was able to talk to anyone without leaving a trace. But unfortunately for him, and although he's dead now and supposedly dead, I don't know really, the traces remained. We have now emails, drafts, memos, and meeting schedules. And the rest is hidden under the rug because Trump administration refuses to tell us more about the Epstein files and the client list of Epstein. He is trying to protect probably the elites or the cabal in the US, those who are still in positions of power, especially in the multi-billionaire class who have enormous influence basically over the US economy, and probably he's trying to save the system which he claimed to be against it to begin with, right? So in this case, it's something that is very, very clear, my friends, and that is Epstein was facilitating a geopolitical negotiation between Israel and Russia about the future of Syria. So he was basically conspiring and coordinating at the same time, right? But the real goal here was reshaping the Middle East. So if we take a step back and understand the bigger picture, since the early 2000s, Israel's strategic doctrine has been built on simply one principle, right? Break the regional threats into smaller, fragmented, non-sovereign entities. For example, Iraq, fragmented, Libya, fragmented, Syria is now fragmented. It's not a coincidence, right? The goal, unlike what many of these pundits claim, was not to bring democracy. It was not to protect civilians. It was not to end authoritarianism. It was to reduce Syria into manageable security zones. Security zones that cannot mobilize any armies, security zones that cannot rebuild, security zones that rely on external security guarantees, and security zones that pose no threat to Israel's regional primacy. Epstein's communications with Barak match, right, perfectly with this doctrine. And the fall of Assad was considered profitable for them, not in money alone, but in geopolitical capital. Every step we saw of Syria's descent was for them an asset. And I think many people should understand that this is not some sort of anti-Israel rhetoric, but this is simply what this document shows. And we have now something that we can say it's a brutal, with brutal clarity, and that is Epstein's network, aided by Ehud Barak, was trying to shape a post-Assad Syria that would serve Israeli interests first. Not Syrian interests, not minority interests, not democracy, and not peace, right? Just strategic gains for Israel. And here comes Epstein's intelligence Rolodex. And I think here is where things become even darker, because it seems that Epstein wasn't just a financier. He wasn't just a socialist. He wasn't just a predator. He was, by all credible indicators, a deal breaker, a broker for intelligence communities, not only Israeli, not only American, but on the international scene. And he had access to everyone, basically, right? And this is where I want to show you who he knew in the United States, right? In one email, as you see on the screen, Jeffrey Epstein tells Barak he can arrange conversations with Leon Panetta, former CIA director, Case Alexander, NSA chief, Richard Clarke, and others deeply tied into America's national security establishment. And ask yourself this question: why is Epstein offering this during a discussion about Syria's war? And why is Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister, turning to Epstein, of all the people, to discuss geopolitical strategy? And the answer is, in my opinion, is not as complicated as we think, because Epstein lived in the gray zone, in the intelligence adjacent world. And this is the unofficial world, right? This is unknown. This is not the corridors that we see. This is not the people who are in front of the cameras. But this is the world where policy is shaped before officials ever take the podium, right? The work behind the scenes. And this is how modern regime change works, basically. Not simply via CIA memos or UN votes, and not in front of the cameras. But as you see, in emails between private billionaires and political elites. I know it's crazy, but this is the reality, the unfortunate reality. And Epstein's language, my friends, reveals something haunting, right? For him, Syria wasn't a suffering nation. It wasn't a country being torn apart. It wasn't a humanitarian catastrophe. For him, as he described in the email, Syria was, quote, perfect. But why it was perfect? Because for him, Syria was unstable. Because for him, Syria was vulnerable. Because for him, Syria was exploitable, right? For Epstein and Barak and their likes, wars aren't just tragedy. Wars are opportunity for them. So this is the mentality of the geopolitical class, or this cabal that we are talking about in today's stream, right? For them, chaos is basically potential. Bloodshed is for them is leverage, and destruction basically bargaining power, right? So when I say these so-called elites or cabal are sociopathic, psychopaths, criminals, I truly mean it, because their morality doesn't exist, basically. Their conscience is replaced by this financial and geopolitical calculation, and Syria basically became the template for them. And here comes the Russian piece of the puzzle. Ehud Barak's view, clearly expressed in these emails, was that Russia should be the main arbiter in Syria. You may ask, why is that? Because Russia's intervention would force the US to accept a deal that aligns with Israel's long-term preferences. And those are no Iranian presence in the south, which means close to the Golan Heights, no Syrian military rebuild, but rather Syria stays just a police state, just like the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, as I told you many, many times. And 3, no unified independent Syrian state. For Israel, they want to see a fragmented Syria governed by a new leader, weak enough to depend on outside powers, but strong enough to suppress internal rivals. Does that sound familiar? It should, right? Because this is exactly what we have today in Syria. We have a de facto Syrian ruler that Washington now openly embraces, a figure who controls territory through militias, not an army, and a man who has directly overseen massacres of Syria's religious and ethnic minorities. And Trump welcomed him, right? Trump welcomed him. But if the US embraces him like this, in my opinion, it also implicitly endorses the massacres committed under his command. And this also applies to Russia and China, by the way. I'm not excluding them, just for you to know. And the massacres, unfortunately, do not matter to them. And I truly want to show you something here, but I want to slow down a little bit, because this is where the story intersects with the moral crisis of US foreign policy. Thousands of Alawite Syrian civilians tortured and slaughtered by the Jolani regime. Thousands of Syrian Druze abducted and executed by the Jolani regime. Churches bombed. Many villages ethnically cleansed completely, and those are all documented, filmed, and posted on social media platforms, by the way. Even the British, The Times, described scenes in Syria that no human should witness. And the killers, basically, their faces mostly are uncovered. They're laughing on video, proudly posting these crimes on social media. And believe me, many of those men who committed these crimes are still active in Jolani's militias and their so-called general security, and some have been even promoted into more senior positions. Some have been whitewashed as security forces. And yet, the US, Russia, China, they are all partnering now with this very leadership that commanded these massacres. So when any of these officials in Washington or Moscow or Beijing say they are worried about minority rights, I think we have to forgive Syrians for not believing a word of it, right? Because it's just rhetoric nowadays and not any credible action on the ground. Why these emails and this connection between Epstein and Barak matters today? Because we have to connect the past to the present. And when we see this, how this back channel they created, that invisible Israel-Russia-US axis has produced the exact outcome they envisioned. Like whatever they talked in these emails, or whatever outcome they wanted to reach in Syria, mostly it happened. Assad is gone. A new leader rules, but is dependent on external powers. Russia oversees the stability or a buffer zone between the Turkish influence and the Israeli influence, though this is in the central Syria. Israel's northern border is insulated, and the US is re-entering Syria under the banner of counterterrorism cooperation. They say now the Jolani regime has joined the US campaign against ISIS. They're making a mockery out of it, right? And everything they disguise privately is now basically happening publicly. The Syria we are seeing today is not the product of protests, nor uprisings, nor democracy movement. It is the product of this cabal engineering. Deals, emails, and meetings that took place years and probably decades before. And this is the real story, right? This is the story the mainstream media will never tell you, because it implicates everyone. Israel, the US, Russia, Gulf states, private intelligence networks, billionaires, NGOs, academics, and covert actors like Jeffrey Epstein. Basically, this is the web, right? This, like a big web standing behind the war. And here we come to my monologue's most important point about this issue. And here we have to break it down plainly. So we have Epstein and Barak. They are communicating, but they were not just chatting. They were sending each other emails and coordinating. They were planning. They were discussing regime change in Syria. They were connecting intelligence officials together. They were writing geopolitical scripts. They were treating Syria like a project, right? The Syrian war was a tragedy, basically, that spiraled out of control. But this was not an accident. It was not simply a miscalculation. It was by design, by the same people who never paid any price for everything that followed the regime change. And I want to say some final word about this case. I think as Trump met with Jolani, and also today the Chinese foreign minister met with the foreign minister of Jolani, I want to say something very clearly. When you align yourself with a figure whose forces committed sectarian massacres, when you shake hands with a man who presided over the slaughter of minorities, when you elevate someone who came to power through terror, coercion, and foreign support, I don't think you're bringing peace to Syria. I think you are legitimizing the very violence you claim to oppose. But this is the legacy of back channels. This is the cost of shadow diplomacy. And this is the outcome of treating war as cash flow. And unfortunately, this is the tragedy of Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak's geopolitical playground. Basically a Syria shaped not by its own people, but rather by this cabal of men who never cared about Syrians at all. So as I move forward in this live streaming, you have to understand, guys, that first of all, I want to thank our friend. Palestine will set us all free. Thank you, Kevork, for your analysis. Thank you, Kevork. Your analysis is illuminating. Thank you very much, my friend. And thank you so much for your generous support, by the way. And guys, while you're watching this stream, I would really appreciate it if you simply hit the like button, the thumbs up as you're watching this live streaming. Then this stream would reach into more people, whether it's live or when the live is over, more people will get notifications and suggestions in the suggestion list to watch this important stream. I would really appreciate that. Now that we know a lot about Epstein's connection with the Syria file, one of the people who was communicating with Epstein was Tom Barak. Tom Barak is the US Special Envoy to Syria and the ambassador of the US in Turkey. And you remember the email between them, send a photo for you and Let me just show you the exact email so that I won't paraphrase. Tom, Barak, Epstein. Tom, Barak, and Epstein basically. Okay, so I will show you this email because this is what we are talking about. Tom, Barak. So this is a newly released email from the House Oversight Committee. 20,000-page document dump reveals the disturbing closeness between Jeffrey Epstein and Tom Barak. The same Tom Barak who now serves as U.S. ambassador to Turkey and envoy for Syria, notorious for threatening Lebanon and calling the Lebanese animals. In 2016 message, Epstein wrote to Barak. This is Epstein writing to Barak. Send me photos of you and child. Make me smile. Those are the people who make decisions nowadays. Those are predators, possible pedophiles, basically, in charge of US foreign policy. Can you imagine the absurdity of the matter? And this is the guy who recently was during a meeting with Jolani, and of course his trumpets are very happy about endorsement from someone like Tom Barak. Tom Barak basically, see what he says. The US envoy, Tom Barak, addresses Syrians in Washington. He says, this leadership, he means Jolani, comes once in a lifetime, once every 100 years, in reference to, look, he calls him the legitimate president sitting beside him.
And this amazing leadership which comes not once in a lifetime, not once in 100 years.
But he's right. This type of leadership comes once in a lifetime, because the US knows so well the difficulty of taking over Syria. They have been trying this since the 50s. The first attempt for CIA coup in the world after World War II was in Syria. This was the first time they engaged into this type of dubious and covert operation in order to install a regime that is preferable for the interests of the US in the region. They've been trying for a very long time. They succeeded it after 75 years, basically. So he is correct to say this type of puppet regime, which serves us and whatever we order him, he is obeying, because his main credit is obedience. The US, whatever the US says to Jolani, Jolani will follow suit. There is no way for him to reject or have reservations. A reservation means rejection for the US. And since Jolani is dependent on the US lifting sanctions, allowing reconstruction, extracting oil in the eastern shore of the Euphrates, allowing foreign investors to come, everything depends on the US approval, rejection, or veto. And the Jolani regime basically is a toothless rabbit. They cannot reject their masters in any way or shape. So this is like the best thing that happened to the US in the region, and they cannot repeat this. This is a one time in a lifetime matter, right? They've been trying for 75 years, so probably every 100 years a puppet government could come and destroy all the legacy of Syria and create a new Syria that is obedient to the US and revolves in the orbit of the US and sink the country into forever debts to the IMF. So whoever comes next for the next 100 years, everybody will be under the mercy of the US. That's why this is the best investment for the US ever in the region. And that's why Operation Timber Sycamore was the costliest CIA covert operation to arm and finance multinational Takfiri terrorist jihadists in Syria since the Afghanistan war. After the Afghanistan war, the CIA has not spent $1 billion per year to arm and train multinational jihadists like they did in Syria. We're talking about $1 billion per year, every year. And beside the US, we had these regional countries, especially Qatar and Saudi Arabia, the cows that the US milks usually in the region, and they have been funneling billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars into the Syrian market, right? To oust Assad, basically. But unfortunately, many of the allies of Syria abandoned Syria. And I say this, although I have repeated many, many times, the only ones who should be blamed are the Syrians and the Syrian leadership, the former one. But still, in my opinion, after the regime change, the allies of Syria, especially Russia and China, are making a huge mistake for normalizing Jolani. And today, we have the foreign minister of China basically receiving the foreign minister of Jolani. So this is the so-called multipolar world. And I made a sarcastic post today on X. I said, the multipolar world is thriving so much that its proponents are proudly hosting Jolani officials placed in Damascus after one of the most expensive CIA covert operations since Afghanistan. If this is countering US dominance, Washington must be laughing its head off. And now I'm going to show you how some of the most brainwashed Syrian people respond to such posts, right? I have seen one of them, it seems that either blocked me or because I don't see the response now. Let me check. Yeah, so this is one of the most brainwashed people, for example, Suleiman Al-Ghali. Look how much brainwashed these people are. Just for you to know, when I say the Syrian people are so brainwashed, this is one of the most brainwashed people. He says, so Jolani placed by the overwhelming majority of the Syrian people after a historic decades-long struggle for liberation from a father and son dictatorship that raped, destroyed, and isolated a great and proud nation for the benefit of a small sect backed by a religious theocracy in Iran led by bearded men who hold more extremist views of Islam than this new Syrian government. Do you notice the amount of idiocy in this comment? And rest assured, this guy is the educated one among them. This guy has gone into university and graduated and lives in the United States. So he lived among the American people for a long time. He integrated into the American society, and he supports Al-Qaeda regime in Syria. And in order to justify that, he claims that this is a decades-long struggle for liberation by the Syrian people with no foreign intervention at all, because these people do not even know. Usually, they don't even know the role of the secret services. And even if you explain to them, like I do, an hour-long discussion here on Syriana Analysis, they don't watch it. And if they watch it, they come and comment, this is an Assadist talking point and blah, 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 blah. I'm showing you facts. I'm showing you documents. I'm showing you emails. I'm showing you leaked memos. Like if you put a fact into their face, like put it like this, the paper, and I say, look, it's written here, right? They will not believe you because their understanding comes mostly from a sectarian affiliation. They believe if the Syrian people are overwhelmingly Sunnis, then whoever is a Sunni and comes to power, they will pray for him and they will beg him to stay, regardless of his qualifications, regardless of his independence, sovereignty, or his foreign asset. It doesn't matter for them. If the president is a Sunni, it's perfect. They don't need anything else. If Bashar and Hafez were Sunnis, they would have made status for him in their homes. Status. For rejecting American hegemony, for supporting the Palestinian struggle, for supporting Hezbollah, so for being, let's say, not compromising over the Golan, as they would have made him a god. But because they were Alawites, They despised them. Just that's the only reason they despised him. And if Bashar or Hafez made a compromise on the expense of the Palestinians or on the expense of the Golan Heights and like gave up on the Golan Heights, right? Officially, they went to Israel, they signed, and Trump receives Bashar or Hafez. And then now Trump comes to Syria and meets with Bashar because this is the plan now that Trump will visit Syria. These people would have waged the holy war against Bashar and Hafez and said that this minority sect are traitors and they have pushed the Palestinians under the bus and they have sold out the Golan Heights and we will wage the bloody century-long insurgency against him until we kill every single one of them. I'm just telling you simple, bitter facts. These people are radicalized sectarian maniacs, and whether they hold university degrees or educated, it means nothing. They are probably educated in their fields, but their brains are rotten via sectarian fanaticism. And this is the truth of the matter that nobody can deny, including among Palestinians. Like, how does it make sense for Palestinians, and I don't know the percentage, but I see many Palestinians on social media platforms nowadays, they gloat the destruction of Syria, or they celebrate the regime change in Syria, and some of whom even celebrated the assassination of Nasrallah. From a geopolitical point of view and political point of view, it makes no sense. But in their minds, because they are infected by Al Jazeera and other Qatari-funded outlets who radicalize the people in the region via this sectarian virus, you guys in the US say that we are infected by the woke virus, right? This is what you say. And in our region, we are also infected with this sectarian virus that is impossible to cure. It's impossible to cure. And you cannot really sit with someone who is infected with this brain virus and discuss with them. Completely lost people. This is the unfortunate truth. Now that China is meeting with the foreign minister of Jolani, Association France Press claims that Syria plans to hand over Uyghur fighters to China, two Syrian sources told the AFP. For those who don't know, the Chinese fighters, the Uyghurs, they are over 5,000 fighters in Syria. With their families, they have around 15 to 20,000. And those numbers were very old. These statistics were old. We don't know how many are there now in Idlib, especially in Jisr Shur. And they were brought to Syria via the Turkish intel. They were brought here for two purposes. They were brought to Syria to fight against the Syrian regime, the former Syrian regime, because they are strong fighters, very capable fighters, and they are ideologically radicalized. And the second reason is to prepare their transfer later into Central Asia, into Xinjiang, to create a security instability on the borders with China or on the road of Silk Road Initiative. This is the plan. It's very clear. The Chinese know it. But now, in my opinion, they hope that the new Syrian regime would hand over some of the leaders of these Uyghurs in Syria. And if they do, I think this will create a civil war in the country, civil war among the jihadists. But one of the trumpets of Jolani denied these allegations via the Association France Press. His name is Hamza Al-Mustafa. He is the Minister of Information in the Jolani regime. He says, an official source in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to Sana, there is no truth to what AFP reported regarding the intention of the Syrian government to hand over fighters to China. I don't know who to believe, but if the Syrian regime officials say this is untrue, probably it's not true because they have invested so much. These Uyghurs, they were the frontline fighters. They were the suicide bombers. They were the Inrimasiyin. You know what the Inrimasiyin is? Inrimasiyin are people who go with a suicide vest. First, they fight with a gun until their ammo is over, and then they explode themselves. They don't simply go and blow up themselves. They are beyond the suicide bombers. They are more sophisticated than the suicide bombers, right? But we are living in, they have created a parallel universe, a parallel world, a parallel reality to the people, that when you read what they write about Syria, these trumpets of Jolani, some of whom are notorious Muslim Brotherhood activists who never lived in Syria, they were all the time outside of Syria, exiled in London or in Turkey. Now they are in Syria, and they were parachuted into Syria, most likely by the MI6 and Jonathan Powell, who is the head of Intermediate Organization, NGO. And Jonathan Powell was the chief of staff of Tony Blair. And he sent someone like Claire Hajjaj to Syria. And it is claimed that she lives in the Syrian presidential palace and gives instructions to the Jolani regime. And one of these, in my opinion, one of the Muslim Brotherhood activists who was embedded in this British NGO architecture is Razan Safur, and I spoke about her in the past. And this is the parallel reality they create. Sorry that I have to show the screenshot because she blocked me and I cannot show you from her profile. This is what she says. This is footage from the reopening of the Syrian embassy in London. She said, I accompanied my parents to protest outside this embassy every single year since the age of 10. Like, she didn't understand anything about the Syrian war, but because her parents told her that Assad is bad, so she went with them since she was 10 years old. Upon the beginning of the revolution, we protested every week until the embassy was shut down. Today, we entered the embassy for the first time. So look, armed with our pride and dignity as its rightful owners. So basically, they're selling the people a parallel reality, as I wrote here, by rewriting the dictionary in real time. Sectarian insurgency now means revolution. Shame now means pride. Indignity now means dignity. They just change the words, change the meaning, and they think they can change the truth. This is how much they propagandize the Syrian people, that everything is in the country is sucked dry, but this is the victory, this is the pride, this is the revolution, right? It's an upside down world. And as I mentioned to you at the beginning of this live streaming, even if 24 million people agree to this reality, I don't have to agree with them. I don't have to agree with them. I don't think that the quantity can overcome the quality. Like nowadays on social media platforms, for example, people, and I'm not criticizing them, but some people decide to get naked in front of the camera and just do some seductive movements and generate 100,000, 200,000, 1 million views. Does it mean that these people are presenting anything of quality to the people? No. But most people, unfortunately, especially men, they're just, sorry to say, horny people, and they're watching this. And now Jolani is getting completely naked in front of all his partners, his allies, and his former enemies. And these people are selling this as dignity and pride and revolution and success, right? It doesn't matter, in my opinion, what they say. And it doesn't matter how many Syrians agree with this narrative. For me, I don't think there is anyone in Syria, anyone who has studied these files the same way I did. There is no one in Syria who can go on TV and explain all these things the way I did on this channel. I'm not saying this in an arrogant manner. I went to Syria before the regime change, and if you talk to anyone in Syria, even back then, they don't know about Operation Timber Sycamore. They don't know about the WikiLeaks files, and they don't know about Epstein, Ehud, Barak, the joint military operation room in Turkey, joint military operation room in Jordan, the tens of billions of dollars poured into the country via Qatar, Saudi Arabia, different affiliations of these non-state actors, the terrorist groups. They don't know about these things. They just know these simplistic narratives of people like Razan Safur They're selling them illusions. And the proof of that is, by the way, I just saw that our moderator with Access joined this live streaming. Ahleen Habibi, welcome. And I'm going to show you a video which proves my point. This is a video from Aleppo. And I say, brainless Syrians are losing their minds over a photo of Bashar. So basically, there is a government building. I think this is the Ministry of Education in Syria, in Aleppo. So they found from the window that there is a hanged picture of Bashar still there. And they went mad. They went crazy. Look at this.
احتجاج كبيرة أمام مديرية التربية والتعليم بحلب بعد ظهور صورة لبشار الأسد بأحد المكاتب. ليك الصورة ليك شفتوها؟
Look, they're going crazy about a photo of Assad hanged in probably an abandoned room in the Ministry of Education in Aleppo.
صورة لبشار الأسد لساتها موجودة بأحد المكاتب بمديرية التربية والتعليم بحلب. طبعا هون
Look how many people have gathered because of this great scandal in Aleppo.
المعلمين عم يحاولوا إنه يدخلوا لجوا هن يشيلوها بإيدهم.
So basically, you have Israeli occupation forces setting up new checkpoints deep inside Syrian territory in Al-Qunaytira. Turkish intelligence controls every detail of life in Aleppo, from bakeries to security. But these people keep crying over a picture, right? This is how much the Syrian people are propagandized nowadays. It's a hopeless situation, basically. But if you have people like Charles Lister selling you the illusions like this, and they sell you everything that is wrong about Syria from the early days of the war. Look at this picture, which is made by AI, by the way. He says parts of Syria are beginning to see huge improvements in electricity supply, with Damascus and Aleppo, Hama all receiving 16 to 24 hours of electricity per day in recent days. It's clearly a fake map, by the way. This is an AI-generated map. But even if, let's suppose this is correct and the people in Syria are receiving now more electricity, which is great news, right? We want for the Syrian people to receive electricity. I want to ask you something. In 2011, when they wanted to remove the regime and destroy the country completely for its sake, Syria used to have an extra and more electricity in the country that they used to export to regional countries like Jordan and Lebanon. Right? This is number one. And number two, as Kevork says, but with what cost, Kevork? The cost is that the people now pay 800% more because Turkish and Qatari companies are the ones generating electricity. So in 2010, when Syrians used to own their own electricity, their own companies, and generate electricity and pay the fraction of the money, now they're getting the same amount of electricity of 2011 with 800% more expensive bills. How does that even make sense? How does that even make sense? And this, they consider it the victory. This is the victory for them. I just want to finally read you final news, which is new. It's a sad news for this week, just for you to know what is going on in the country. This week, there was another massacre in Syria, massacre against the Alawites. The massacre that took place, this is on the 15th of November, so 2 days ago, in the village of al-Hartain, Hon, this area, near Tal Kalakh, this is Tal Kalakh, is not the first, nor will it be the last. Since the fall of the Assad regime, the terrorist factions originating from the town of Tal Kalakh and officially operating within the ranks of the terrorist regime have committed dozens of massacres, thefts, kidnappings of young men and women individual assassinations, and the burning of shrines without any accountability or prosecution, rather with direct complicity from the terrorist Jolani regime. Among the victims of the massacre, which happened 2 days ago, at the cafeteria in the village of al Hartain were 5 martyrs identified as Ali Huwari, Kamal Alwan, Saleh Abu Ghazal, he is the mayor of the village, and Ali Badran. The 5th young man has not yet been identified. This is what's happening in Syria. This is the victories. This is the pride. This is the liberation of the Syrian people. Daily massacres against them. What do you think the Chinese position is regarding ITIM in Syria jihadist forces? Are they prepared for these forces going back to make trouble in Xinjiang? I think this is why China is opening up to Syria. They hope that Turkey and Jolani would detain some of the dangerous individuals in these Uyghurs and hand them over to Xinjiang, to China. In my opinion, they could arrest a few just to show goodwill to China, but rest assured that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them in Syria, at least 5,000 Uyghur jihadists who were invited to Syria for fighting against the former regime and then preparing for the transfer into Central Asia or into Xinjiang again, and especially on the Silk Road initiative, where the Silk Road passes through. This is a geopolitical investment that they have done in the past 14 years, and I don't think they will just give up on this project all of a sudden. I believe that they will transfer them first to Afghanistan, and from Afghanistan later try to transfer them into Central Asia. This is my opinion, and I hope that the Chinese know about this. Otherwise, they will find themselves like the Russians will find themselves soon in Syria in a very isolated situation. The pressure will increase on them, and then they will kick the Russian forces out from Tartus, and they will also try to destabilize the Silk Road initiative through these terrorist elements in the TIP, the Turkestan Islamic Party, and others who come from Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, many other Central European countries, Central Asian countries. And remember, once Turkey opens its corridor between Turkey and Azerbaijan, passing through Armenia, they will have this overland access to the Caspian Sea and beyond in Central Asia. And I believe that Turkey will capitalize on this and try to blackmail China and Russia as well. And remember, there is a precedent of sending these jihadists to Nagorno-Karabakh to fight alongside the Azeri army against the Armenians of Karabakh. So if they have done it in the past already, they would do it, they would copy this also at any point when they are emboldened enough, and also the instructions come from the United States. Our friend says, يُقبرني ربك أنا كيفورك Allah يخليلنا إياك حبيبي inshallah Syria and the Levant will find its way back someday. Ya Ret, we had more people like you in Syria during the hard day. Love you, neighbor. Habibi, I also want for the Syrian people to wake up. They're not going to wake up in this way. It's impossible. They're living in a bubble. They are fed with 24/7 propaganda inside Syria. And if they go into regional channels, any regional channel nowadays, all of them without exception, whether it's in the Emirates, whether it's in the UAE, whether it's in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Morocco, everyone except for the Egyptian media are normalizing Jolani, and they are talking about the great achievements of Jolani and that he opened the world to Syria and he is the liberator. So how would they wake up? And you know very well that people are programmable people and you can brainwash them and indoctrinate them, and this is what happened. And I don't have hope that the Syrians will wake up anytime soon. Maybe they have to pass through the hardest times. They have to feel the pain on their skin, and then maybe they wake up, but it's too late. That's why I said Syria as we know it is gone, and there is no way for it to come back. Maybe a century later. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I believe that this is not going to be the case anytime soon. I don't have hope in the great awakening of the Syrian people. So we are already over 1 hour. I didn't even feel that I have been speaking for the past 65 minutes. My friends, thank you so much for tuning in to today's stream. I really appreciate every single one of you, whether you watch this on YouTube or on Rumble. Before leaving this stream, I would really appreciate it if you guys just hit the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel if you appreciate the work I'm doing, and if you want to go one step further and support the independent work I'm doing, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. You can also simply scan this QR code on the corner of the screen if you have a smartphone in your hand. And I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday. So thank you so much also Red Access for moderating the live chat, Habibi. And we'll see you tomorrow, guys. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.